Welcome to National Arts. I'm Mike Baker. The National Actors Theater, under the tutelage of Tony Randall, has mounted a painstakingly accurate rendition of Richard Brinsley Sheridan's play of morals and manners, The School for Scandal. The play exposes folly and reaffirms basic human benevolence. Joining Randall on stage is the hilarious Simon Jones as Sir Joseph and the very talented Kate Forbes as Lady Teazle. They, along with members of the acting company, assure us that the screen of hypocrisy must indeed fall.
Thank you, Sir Oliver. Yes, I've entered into the happy state. But we won't talk of that now.
True. Old friends should not begin on grievances at first meeting. No.
Tony, modern criticism talks much about School for Scandal and says that it's a theatrical phenomenon. Yet it is a little light on the moral treatise, isn't it?
Yes. That is, the wastrel, the profligate, is not punished for being a profligate. But I look at it entirely differently. Nobody in the play has any visible means of support. They're all members of the idle rich, all of them. And except maybe Sir Peter. Sir Peter's probably a businessman. I believe he's in the real estate business, a London property, which then and now is very good. But I believe the real moral, if there is one, behind the play is what's always behind comedies of manners, their social criticism. At the time this play was written, the American Revolution was going on, and 99% of the British people lived in unbelievable poverty and filth. But the top 1% lived on the others. And though that's not said in the play, it's implicit. You're dealing with very, very rich people, the idle rich. And I think the moral rebuke is there. I see that. I've seen it from the beginning. It's not been commented on by any critic, but what do you expect?
True. It's no wonder.
They know nothing.
It's no wonder that the British lost the colonies, given the atmosphere that we're seeing among the aristocratic here.
Well, if you saw the movie, The Madness of George III, Sheridan, the author of the play, is very much one of the characters behind the king plotting. And that was true. He wrote these two masterpieces of the English language, The Rivals and The School for Scandal, before he was 25. He was a man of genius, no question about it. And then devoted the rest of his life to politics.
You think that he was actually a member of Parliament, and he also had the theatrical upbringing of sorts. These two married together gave us the genius that we see in this man.
No question about it. We don't teach rhetoric anymore. He was perhaps the best speaker of his day. In his most famous speech, lasted 5 hours, without notes, on a very important question, a moral question. People came from all over to hear him speak. They came from abroad. He was a star. Also, he's probably the only politician of his day who never took a bribe. Open bribery was common. It was not considered reprehensible.
He had a rather colorful background as well.
Yes.
He often said later that he drew on those early romantic experiences and what have you from his early life. One in particular, when he marries this 17-year-old Elizabeth Linley, who was betrothed to this 60-year-old squire, and in an effort to escape this relationship and another with the gentleman he had to duel with, he eloped.
Yes, whether the marriage was consummated or not, no one knows. Later, they did become legitimately man and wife.
Oh, but now, Sir Peter, if we have finished our daily jangle, I presume I may go to my engagement at Lady Sneerwell's.
Why, there's another precious circumstance. A charming set of acquaintance you've made there.
Nay, Sir Peter, they are all people of rank and fortune, and remarkably tenacious of reputation.
Yes, tenacious of reputation with a vengeance, for they don't choose anybody should have a character but themselves. Such a brood. There's many a poor wretch has been sent to prison who's done less mischief than these utterers of forged tales.
Your character, Sir Peter, in a way, is almost the voice, essentially, of Sheridan in many respects. I mean, you're a caustic critic of this college of scandal.
Yes.
You espouse a variety of different virtues and obviously good wit. And I'm wondering if you're almost the mouthpiece of Sheridan in a way.
I suppose so, as close as any character is. However, his principal problem in the play is that he's married a young wife. I can sympathize with that. But that character, the old fool who's married a young wife, goes back at least to Plautus and the Roman comedies and is a stock figure throughout the Commedia dell'arte. I think Pantalon, or one of them, is always an old fool who's married a young wife. And it's not uncommon to see him as a cuckold. And that's hinted at very broadly in this play. She almost cuckolds him, but does not. But that has a long, very long theatrical tradition behind it.
But with what a charming air. She contradicts everything I say. And how pleasingly she shows her contempt for my authority. Well, though I can't make her love me, there is great satisfaction in quarreling with her. And I think she never shows to such advantage as when she's doing everything in her power to plague me.
The aside that's in Restoration Comedy really provides you a great outlet for some additional acting on stage, doesn't it?
Yes, those are written in. In the past, we've been criticized for saying those lines directly to the audience. I remember in Phaedo we were criticized for that, although in Phaedo there are long speeches directly to the audience, like Sir Peter's first speech. When an old bachelor marries a young wife, what is he to expect? That's my first line. The last couple of weeks it's brought down the house. People think I put it in. But it's too bad we don't do that anymore. It's also too bad we've eliminated the soliloquy in modern drama. I guess Chekhov was the last to use the soliloquy. It's in Uncle Vanya. Masha does have a soliloquy. But it's an invaluable tool for the playwright. Why throw it away?
And what have I done for you? I've made you a woman of fashion, of fortune, of rank. In short, I have made you my wife.
Well then, there is but one thing more you could make me to add to the obligation, and that is...
My widow, I suppose.
Kate, at first it seems as if Lady Teazle's job is not to curry favor, but to curry mischief. Is that true?
That's one of the funnest parts about it, is I think she gets such a thrill from teasing her husband. She loves to drive him crazy. And I think that's part of their relationship. What they both like about each other, and also what infuriates them.
The case of one-upmanship doesn't only exist in telling scandalous tales about one another, but also exists between you and your husband, doesn't it?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. That it is like a game, I think, scoring off each other.
Why do you think it's so important to him that you lose your temper?
I think because it means he's won. If I don't lose my temper, then, you know,
I see.
I still have the advantage.
Once having gotten married, you say to Sir Peter, you know, now that we're married, I'm not accountable to you anymore.
Mm-hmm. And also I say, I think, which is wonderful about her in that scene, women of fashion in London are accountable to nobody after they are married. Now I'm a woman of fashion. I'm not a country girl anymore. And in that first scene I was looking the other day, she refers to herself as fashionable or talks about fashion something like 8 or 10 times in a small little scene.
It's a sad commentary on 18th century England, isn't it?
It is, and it's what excites her about her new life and about her husband, that he's provided this life for her after a really dull time in the country.
How interesting you say that if you wanted to control me, you should have adopted me.
Mm-hmm.
There, and I'd be your charge, and you could demand what you wanted of me. But since you married me, you have no control over me whatsoever. And the irony of the whole thing is he gets no, I guess, sexual gratuities either way. At least not initially.
Or that it's in the tease, I think. It's in, but the titillation between them, I think, is in the not delivering, the promise, the no, you know.
Yes.
That sort of thing.
But, Sir Peter, you know that you promised to come to Lady Sneerwell's too.
Well, I'll call in just to look after my own character.
Mwah. Then indeed.
The price that you pay for societal involvement does get laborious and tiring after a while, doesn't it?
Or that I think she learns a big lesson. You know, she doesn't, I think in her natural high spirits and wanting to please and wanting to fit in. She doesn't see what she's doing quite until she sees that she's hurt Sir Peter, who she loves, she cares very much for.
There is a definite gap in communication between the sexes here, isn't there? Which seems to exist even today.
But I think it's one that they have a lot of fun with. I mean, that she exults in her femininity and she loves to drive him crazy, and she uses that, uses the gap, I think.
You often wonder with all the societal airs if there was any sort of communication that existed in the drawing room, or if it was all just frivolous and superficial.
And to say that she comes into that world from a very different place. I think she has a lot of native sense, horse sense, she's not quite the same as the others, even though she aspires more than anything to be like them, to be the best, to be the most fashionable.
Now, my dear Lady Teazle, if you would but once make a trifling faux pas. You can't conceive how cautious you would grow and how ready to humor and agree with your husband.
Do you think so?
Oh, I am sure on't. And then you would find that all scandal would cease at once. For your character, at present, is, in short, like a person in a plethora, absolutely dying from too much health.
But when I announced to my friends, and including my mother, that I was going to play a double-dealing, rather slimy hypocrite, she said, "It's perfect casting." And then realized what she'd said.
You came a considerable time after the part, but it's clear the part was made for you.
I don't know how to take that either.
A good deal of the success of this role is an ability to handle the aside. This is something you don't normally do in everyday theater.
It's an interesting idea, isn't it? Because Shakespeare doesn't have Hamlet go, "To be or not to be, that is the question." Which is what he would do as direct address to the audience. It's very interesting, the use of it, too. Like little bracketed stage directions. Is it because he is not altogether sure how the characters' mental processes are coming across to the audience, so he feels he has to emphasize it? I don't know, but I found it very helpful as far as the character was concerned, because he's usually played as a rather cold-eyed snake. And I thought, no, I don't want to play him as a cold-eyed snake. I want him to be played as somebody who fancies himself as a scheming villain, but who actually is rather amateurish and a little incompetent, and therefore, in a vague way, endearing. So these asides are really sort of sharing, bringing them in on the plot.
Do you know Sir Peter has grown so ill-natured to me of late, and so jealous of Charles, too? Oh, that's the best of the story, isn't it?
I'm glad my scandalous friends keep that up.
I'm sure I wish he would let Maria marry Charles. Then perhaps he would be convinced. Don't you, Mr. Surface?
Indeed, I do not. Oh, certainly I do.
Now, you even say yourself that you're no rake, but you're also no saint. So where does that put you?
Oh, well, I'm really after the money, actually. Funnily enough, that is the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom line is that I'm after Sir Peter's ward, who is loaded. I don't care for her particularly. In fact, that's why I have a dalliance with his wife instead. And unfortunately, that's what brings me down. How often that's the case, too. The deep-laid plans. Think of those politicians with not necessarily noble motives, but motives of some kind of statecraft.
Yes, rather
brought down
hot-blooded.
by a moment of uncontrollable lust.
All the great ones.
Yes,
Anthony and Cleopatra, Passion versus Reason.
Absolutely.
But scandal is almost votive here, isn't it?
Well, yes. I think there's a great deal of relish in the elegance of a plot and the satisfaction in which it turns out to be effective. So, yes, there is a certain, almost like a chess game, I suppose. It's a little cruder the way scandal is played now, I think it's fair to say. British tabloids, for example.
Yes, and it's how interesting that most of those tabloids in this country are done by Britishers.
Isn't that interesting? Yes, I noticed the National Enquirer is almost entirely dominated by former tabloid journalists from England.
So we have exported some of those vitriolics over here, in essence, probably trying to recapture the colonies and to bring them back into the fold.
It's a subtle plot.
There's a real double standard alive here, isn't there? You're encouraged, I guess, to have little dalliances on the side, and you're not chastised for doing so, and yet the woman can't even be in the company
Well,
anymore.
we've always had that, and it still applies. There's still that indulgence. I remember Yorkshireman saying to me, ooh, and he was, I know, in the throes of having 3 simultaneous affairs, if he'd ever caught his wife being unfaithful to him, he'd kill her. And I attempted to explain to him that there was a total lack of logic and justice in this. But he absolutely refused to acknowledge it. It's curious, but we have to face it.
What does that say about the male animal?
Oh, I don't know. It needs work.
Do you think that Joseph would clearly betray anyone in order to get his justifiable deserts?
Apparently so, yes. His brother, his colleague in crime, anyone, yes. And I think that's true of a number of politicians, I think. It's politics. He describes it as politics, interestingly enough. A curious dilemma my politics have run me into, he says.
Yeah. There are a lot of other things in here, too, that were probably interesting at the time, that smack of some humor now. One in particular, that to print is vulgar. I thought that was a wonderful comment.
Yes, yes. Yes, she says, I wonder you never have any of your poems printed, Sir Benjamin. Sir Benjamin backbite. He says, oh, no, it's vulgar to print. I find they circulate better, he says, and I'm paraphrasing, by giving copies in confidence to the friends of the parties.
Most definitely.
Most definitely.
They must not have thought a great deal about the Romantic poets of the time, because when indeed he does spout off some of his poetry, it's sheer foppery.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they must not.
The other interesting thing, of course, is that it is very vulgar to print because he doesn't need to make any money out of it, of course.
That's true. That's true.
All these people are extremely wealthy and have nothing else to do with their time.
And then I think Sir Peter says that we ought to be able to sue for the horrible things that are said about us. I'm sure every barrister at the time was rather encouraged by the prospect of additional coins in his pocket.
Well, the interesting thing, he says, not only sue the people who originate the stories, but even the people who pass it on.
And they're equally as evil, aren't they?
Yes. And I think, actually, British libel laws do actually cover that. I think there are people who pervade, and that's why the media are a little more careful over there, somehow.
In the Revelation scene, you play it for all it's worth. And therein, I think, is a lot of your talent at work. A move of the hand, a move of the face, a tilt of the head, all that. I mean, is that plotted pretty much ahead of time, or do you just let it occur naturally, depending on the audience?
Well, by sheer repetition, it begins to fix itself. But it does adjust according to the tone of the audience, how far one has to do it, or how little. That scene, of course, it could be a bugbear because it is endlessly quoted as the classic, the high point of classic comedy, the screen scene. So if we fail to pull it off, we're in big trouble. So, one has to pull the stops out to pull it off. And thanks to Kate Forbes and Tony Randall, we do.
Yes, the ultimate love triangle of sorts, too.
What's interesting is it doesn't duck the issue. Now, other writers might have the mistress discovered behind the screen, the cuckolded husband standing there and the lover caught in the act, and would probably crossfade and then talk about what they discussed later. But he actually faces it. He actually has them talk it out, in a manner of speaking, which is a brave thing to do.
A little French milliner. And the best of the jest is, she's in the room now.
What the devil she is. Behind the screen? Oh, Slight, let's unveil her. Again, we shall have a peep at Sir Little Milliner. Joseph will never forgive me. I'll stand by you. Lady Teazle, by all that's wonderful.
Lady Teazle, by all that's damnable.
The screen scene is one of the most wonderful scenes in all of drama. And in a way, it's almost a play within a play, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
I mean, there's 5 acts there. There are the 3 intrusions, there's the screen coming down, and then there's the resolution.
I would like $1 for every time a writer has copied that scene in one form or another since then. If I were a drama teacher, I might assign some of my students to try to track it down. In all drama, in every country, that scene has had tremendous effect. In Russian drama, the plays of Ostrovsky, which are not popular, and they're not well known in America, or really anywhere but Russia, but they're wonderful. They're marvelous plays. He used everything he could take out of Sheridan, and so have many, many, many others. But that scene it can be called seminal. It's been copied in a million movies where someone's right there listening and, when the screen is knocked over and she's discovered, she makes a beautiful, beautiful speech about what she's realized and how wrong she's been and how touched she's been and how from now on her future life will give testimony to that. That's the recognition scene. She's the only one on the play who comes to a recognition about him or herself and learns something and embarks on a different course of action. That makes her the lead. She's got to be the lead if she's got the recognition scene.
We're saying something about the middle class, aren't we?
Yeah.
And how they have more common sense.
But that particular scene is a classic example of a disagreement between an actor and the director. I play it the director's way. I've always wanted to play it my way, but I won't fight a director. There's no right way. There's no right way. Any scene can be played any number of ways.
How would you play Sir Peter?
When the screen is knocked down, Charles says, "Lady Teazle, by all that's wonderful." And Sir Peter says, "Lady Teazle, by all that's damnable." I can just hear that music. Lady Teazle, by all that's wonderful. Lady Teazle, by all that's damnable. The director doesn't want that. He doesn't want Sir Peter to realize, in that moment, everything. He wants him to realize it more slowly towards the end of the scene that his wife has or almost has committed adultery. And so I play it his way. And something you said when we were taking a break was how moving that scene is. Well, if it's moving, then he must be right. He doesn't want to give it away all too soon. I think Sheridan does with that line, "By all that's damnable." But instead I say, "By all that's damnable." In exactly the same way that Charles says, "By all that's wonderful."
Comedy, of course, is one of your mainstays, if not your mainstay. And you talk about George Abbott being one of the great comedic directors.
I went down to Florida to talk with him before we did Three Men on a Horse, his play. He knew everything. He knew everything. He was one of our giants. Imagine he lived to be 107. Have you ever had dinner with a 106-year-old man? I did. He speared food off my plate. He was still a vigorous,
very robust. Huh?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Opening nights are so important to you. I would think that each and every one of these plays that opens as part of the theater must be gratifying because you are putting these kind of plays back on Broadway.
That's the way I feel about it, certainly. All my life I've believed in this. Every country in the world has it. We all go to London to see the Royal Shakespeare and the National. They're the #1 tourist attractions of the British Isles, incidentally. And you go out to Stratford to see the Royal Shakespeare out there, too. And you look around you, and the audience is all Americans. We all go over to see these wonderful plays done by wonderful actors. We come back and say, "Why aren't we doing them?" Well, that's the way I felt for years and tried to do something about it. I was hoping someone else would start it and ask me in. Then one fine day I realized if I didn't start it myself, I'd never live to see it. So
$1 million of your own money.
Much more than that, but that's beside the point. But I don't have any left, so
You've been exceedingly successful, though, as a development person in fundraising and what have you.
Yes. That, believe it or not, is what I do. And the head of every artistic organization, nonprofit, spends all his time doing that. And the president of every university. Unfortunately, we don't have the government support that they have in every other country. Now, both the Royal Shakespeare and the National each gets $22 million a year from the government. That's why they're so good. And that's why the National can operate 3 theaters and do 24 productions a year. And why I can only do 2 or 3. I don't know if we'll live to see real government support the way every nation in the world has.
Well, Tony, as your next project, you're getting ready to do Inherit the Wind, and I know that has a strong history.
Yes, well, I was in the original. Biggest hit I was ever in on Broadway. That was 40 years ago. I've been tempted to play my old part again, but I won't. I don't want to give those guys in the press another chance to fire their pistols at me, but 40 years ago when we did this play, in an incredible production starring Paul Muni and Ed Begley, the religious right was a lunatic fringe that we didn't take very seriously, although that's what the play is about. The danger of the religious right taking over and forcing their views on everybody. Today, they're in a position to dominate the next Republican convention. It's a damn serious business.
I look forward to the production.
Yeah. The play is 1,000 times more pertinent today than when it was written.
In your book, Groucho Marx seemed to sum up the insurmountable delights that are connected with doing theater. When you two were sitting at the Tony Awards, and he made a very simple comment about it all. You have to share that with us.
Oh, well, all the chorus girls of all the shows were across the hall in one big dressing room, and they kept throwing the door open and running in and out, and you'd see them without any clothes on. Groucho leaned over to me and said, "You don't get this in the pants business."
Oh, my. Congratulations to the National Actors Theater on a wonderful production. Until next time, remember, art was meant to be appreciated, so you be a part of it.